have with us presenting this afternoon our guest speaker, Mr. Brian Jones. He's a retired Vice President of Mega Insurance Company Limited. But before I just tell you a little bit about him, let's go into the word. And it's taken from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 to 19. And it reads, "Instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches. God, who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy, instruct them to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take of that which is life indeed." It is a mouthful that says a lot. We are to fix our hope on God, in spite of whatever challenges we face. And so, the speaker today, and I'm sure you would recognize him in that shot, always a man of business, always seeking to encourage and empower. He is the sitting chairman of the Love Until Foundation, the chairman of Casa de Corazon, a home in the area of Sangre Grande. He's the sitting director of Myrtle's Place, past president of the Rotary Club of the Port of Spain West. He, as well as his team, they conduct life skills training across several schools across the nation. And he will let you know all the letters that come behind his name. They speak to 4 professional degrees in insurance that he has done. He has had a successful relationship, long-standing relationship with the one and only Simone Jones, and he has 3 adult children. And certainly he conducts financial planning seminars throughout Trinidad. Elder Brian Jones, because he is the elder responsible for administration at the Laventil Adventist Church here in Trinidad. He's a friend, he's a brother, and no, that is not a line introducing another from a radio station. It is a joy to have you, Elder Brian.
Thank you very much.
It's really a privilege for us to be able to sit and appreciate from your perspective and from the experiences that we are all facing while living during this pandemic, how to manage our finances. But just before I hand over, let us put into context what is happening. There's an economic effect and a financial response that we have had to face as individuals, as family members, as church members, as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago and as citizens of the world because of this pandemic. COVID-19 has presented the world and Trinidad and Tobago in particular with both a public health as well as an economic crisis. And interestingly enough, pre-existing issues to the pandemic included significant declines in natural gas prices and unprecedented collapse of oil prices. And in fact, just in reading, there was a decline in oil prices from January of 2020 from 60 US dollars a barrel to $30 in March to 1 US cent per barrel. And this figure turned negative for the first time in history. Now, while it has increased nominally, only marginally by now, consider that Trinidad and Tobago is a natural gas and oil exporting nation. And therefore, amidst having to deal with the worldwide deaths due to...
How are you feeling?
Good evening. Could you kindly please just press the mute button? Thank you so much for recording purposes. So while we are actively facing the challenge of and the trauma of the worldwide deaths due to COVID, this shock has affected each one of us in a personal way, but also in a financial way. We have had to make behavioral changes at all levels. Schools, businesses have been closed, and this has heavily impacted our spending patterns. We have experienced a loss of production business-wise. And so, because we're not spending as much, there's a fear factor associated with the need to be physically distant from each other. We appreciate too, the real estate market here in Chicago has significantly slowed down. Government is asking landlords to be considerate. So they're not getting, landlords themselves are not getting rent. The banks have been asked to just go on pause or, to facilitate those who have mortgages. But then we have small business owners, and we are not, even within the church environment, we have small business owners, and we have some serious questions to face in terms of our future. And that is why I thought that this conversation was really important to have. So, Mr. Brian Jones, thank you for accepting the call. And I'm turning over the screen to you.
Thanks very much,
Your
Dr.
tips
Stillett, Henry Buckmeyer. I just want to clarify that my 4 professional degrees with all its letters is worth 100 of the doctorate that the host has. This evening, as was so eloquently outlined, we're looking at the implication of what is happening now with respect to the pandemic and what possibly will take place in the near future. First of all, I would like to say that I am not concerned about the future because I know who holds the future. And however difficult the future may appear now, and however difficult it may appear now, each person has a different scenario. God will take care of you once you put your life in His hand. I also want to say that that same attitude I take, because many people feel that after tomorrow night, some magic wand will be waved with a new government, whether it's the existing or the opposition. But they all face the same problem a massive deficit, I think, is running over up to 16 billion, unheard of. And all over the world, the developed countries and not so developed countries are running huge deficits. Governments are finding themselves having to intervene to help people just survive. As Doc said, in some cases, asking for a rental reprieve and rental, kind of amnesty. In the United States, they're trying to finalize another stimulus package, I think is the third, so that people could get increased income. And things are tough all around. The food industry, as entertainment and leisure in Trinidad and all over the world, has taken a real hit. But because we believe in God, many of us, or hopefully all of us, we know that in spite of the difficulties, first of all, it was predicted it will get like this. So this is something that we know was coming so suddenly and seemingly out of the blue. But for God, it wasn't out of the blue. And I tell people, as the world comes to a close, more and more, you'll find that the only person who has control of any schedules or any events will be God and God alone. Mankind seems to be hopeless, no matter how powerful, whichever country, in order to handle the situations that will confront us. We don't know how long this pandemic will last. It will last as long as, I guess, there's not a vaccine. And when the vaccine comes, it will take some time for it to make a difference. So we could be in for a long haul. And in answer to one of the questions that was raised, will we survive? I could let you know that people will survive, countries will survive. But conditions will obviously get harder and more difficult as time goes along. So that some of the challenges of the pandemic: negative economic growth for most economies. United States unemployment went up to unprecedented levels. They record theirs very timely. Ours is not so timely. And in Trinidad, unemployment would have gone up significantly over the past few months. In many sectors, people have remained with jobs, but their wages have reduced either because their working hours are less, or companies have told them, in order for you to stay employed, we just cannot pay you what we used to pay you. And there's, as Doc said, reduced economic activity. People are not spending as they used to. Just look at the leisure industry, restaurants, things are not what they used to. And so economic activity is down. And I want to say here at this point that business owners have indicated to the government in no uncertain terms that if the government was to lock down again, many of them say they wouldn't survive if the government was to lock down again. So the existing government is saying that they will not lock down because we have to live with the pandemic, because we just cannot afford to lock down from an economic standpoint. So it's lives against economy, and governments will have to try to blend between keeping the economy going and keeping jobs going, as well as looking after the welfare, health, welfare, and safety of individuals. So it's a very, very difficult juggle. And we see the effects of that in the United States, where the number of people dying is at an astronomical level. Trinidad and Tobago remains with just 8 persons dead. 8 is too many for us. But we only so far have 8 individuals who have died. We obviously didn't want to have any, but we have 8, and we really regretting that. So this is the background on which all of these things are happening. And so we are faced with uncertainty at best, and we are faced after this, for Trinidadians, after this election, we are faced with whichever government that comes into power, having to make hard choices in order for them to try to stabilize. No country could keep providing their citizenry with continued increased welfare benefits and survive, so that they really have to do things to generate economic activity to get people productive. So that is the background on which we are talking. And this evening we'll look at some of the things that are necessary to be done, and some suggestions and strategies to individuals that are important in order for us to survive. First of all, I want to let you know that people have to lower expectations. You can't spend like you used to, and people will have to cut back on the level of activity and the expectations, because there's less disposable income. We need greater prudence in spending. We need to be conservative and cautious when borrowing. We need to not borrow for non-essentials at all. Whereas before, you had that kind of level of job security that you could borrow and say, I'm going away and I need funds and I will borrow for travel. Well, the borders are locked down now, but we have to be judicious in our borrowing. Borrowing should be more for emergency and or investment purposes. But borrowing as we used to before, we have to be very careful. We don't engage in those kinds of borrowing, because it can have deleterious effect if our incomes are reduced and or if our jobs are threatened. And we need to focus on an increased percentage of savings. We normally encourage people to save at like 10% of their income or more. Single people should be saving more. But saving now has to be a mandatory strategy. If you're getting paid and you're not saving any income, any part of your income, that is very, very, very suicidal in these times, because you need a rainy fund, however small, however large. And by the way, there is no large enough rainy fund, because rainy fund could be washed away very quickly in terms of health and other calamities, unfortunately. And I'm suggesting that there's need for greater self-sufficiency in food and other areas. And what I mean is that I will be suggesting this evening in detail that people learn to grow their own food. They have to go back to the land. One of the things that I think another government, new or otherwise, will do going forward, and you have been seeing the signal, is encourage increased agricultural production, both individually and commercially. And I will suggest some stuff to you this evening, to all of us, if you're not involved, to consider getting involved in little kitchen gardens. And I'm seeing more and more people doing kitchen gardens, and we gotta reduce expenses by being more self-sufficient in food. And I was talking to my brother in the United States this evening, and he said that he goes to YouTube to fix anything in his home. So people be coming, when I say self-sufficiency in food and other areas, I'm suggesting that we have to become little tradesmen for our own homes to reduce expenses. We get accustomed that something goes wrong. Many of us who may be like me, whose hands are tied and not very productive in matters of trade, we have to learn to do stuff around the house to minimize the impact of having to go out and just pay for the stuff that needs to be repaired in our home. So these are some of the things that I am suggesting this evening. And as we go along, agriculture is going to be a main suggestion. And also another thing that I'm suggesting, and we are starting that in Laventille Church. I got permission from the first elder of the Laventille Church. Another thing that I'm suggesting is that we learn to develop networking. In other words, find out the skills of the people in your organization or in church, in your community, find out the skills and have them advertise, especially if you know people who are competent, and based on that, create a captive market for people who have skills and who have opportunities to showcase their trade for people immediately. You need to be able to capture the business of people around you, people in your church, people in your community. People around you should not be going out to get a skill that you have. But people need to know it's available, so it has to be recorded, it has to be listed and advertised in your community, in your church. And you have to make sure that you provide competent and efficient and effective service, which is a big problem in this country, so that you could be referred and that your price is good. You know, sometimes we want to charge a big price because we haven't gotten work for a long time. So you have to catch up, make up, and bust price, as we say colloquially. But if we eat little, we'll live long because we'll get more business. And so many people haven't understood that networking and that price, reasonable price is what is necessary in difficult times like these. People who are overcharging because of the availability of so many individuals, people who are overcharging, who are charging just because they feel that's what I'm worth and not looking at the reality of the market, will find themselves having a very good skill with very little business, because people will be looking at price more than anything else as they go out seeking for business services. So I'm saying opportunities, grow one's own food supply. It's not difficult. The Ministry of Agriculture website, you could go on the Ministry of Agriculture website, you could register, you'll get a card, and because of that registration, you'll be able to have access to things that the Agricultural Development Bank, they're giving a lot of incentives now, is doing, have access to material and information so that you will be able to start your own kitchen garden. You'll be able to start, even if it's commercialized or if it's for family or extended family, it's important that we reduce our dependency on food and payment of food, because that's one of our largest bills, providing food for our families. And by the way, the days for you going out and eat, you don't have time at home to prepare meals, so you're buying out. That has to reduce, because people, I've tired showing people the amount of money that is spent in eating out. That needs to come down in these difficult times. We have to be more self-reliant in these times. Development of greater self-sufficiency in home repairs. YouTube could help you there. Reduction in spending on non-essential activities. You have to really re-examine your spending priorities. You have to run a tight financial ship. And in order to run a tight financial ship, you got to monitor your spending, you got to record your spending, you got to live on a budget, and you have to be very aware of what you're doing financially. Because of the uncertainty, it is very important that we live in such a way that we create a fund, a rainy day fund, because every day now the rain is falling and the rainy day fund is needed. Possibility of developing aquaponics business. We have people in this chat, in this meeting right now, who are experts in that. The Ministry of Agriculture could guide you along with that. It is a mechanism now where you could do that in your backyard. You could do a lot of agricultural development in your backyard in limited space with this new aquaponics business activity. And in Love Until, where we are going to start a major initiative with this and generate for people to see how with very little space, you know, people perceive agriculture is a whole set of space. But people can see that in a very small space in your backyard, you can do a whole lot of crop growing with this aquaponics. Also, the Ministry of Agriculture have, particularly for young people, they can apply for agricultural land and be able to develop that land. And that's for young people who would want to get into agriculture. And I talked about greater networking, developing lists of individuals by your community, your church, your groups, whatever you're in, so that people know your skills, both professionally or even in trade, so that they could use your services. So your services need to be efficient, and your service needs to be pleasant, and your price needs to be reasonable, because that is what will keep you going. I know of certain tradesmen who are overrun with work all the time, whether it is recession or not, because they give excellent work. But what is killing Trinidad is that you call a workman to do a job, he fixes your pipe, and then you have to call him back to fix the same pipe and call him back. But there are plumbers I know. One particular guy, I have been using him, he's a friend. When he come and fix your thing, he ain't coming back to fix that again. It's fixed and it's done. And he provides very good service. And so I recommend him generously, but he always have much more work than he could do. So you see, if your work should speak for you, your price should speak for you, your service should speak for you. And so your business could keep going. For those of us who are God-fearing people, we encourage you to start with the ideal. Make sure you're paying you're returning your tithes, because that is not yours to pay, it's yours to return. And that is the basis of which all other blessings could flow financially, returning a faithful tithe. As I said before, save at least 10% of our income. Now, the challenge with savings have a way of, expenses have a way of running down savings. Like once you have savings, expenses always knocking at your door, knocking at your door, knocking at your door. Like expenses is know when you have money. I always coming to wipe you out. But how you save, I always encourage people to save by saving first. You return your tithe and offering, then the next thing you should do is not pay bills, but save. The mistake people make is that they return the tithe and offering and then they start to spend. No. And many people, when they start to spend, within a day or so, they have no more money. Many people, after a day or two, the money runs out. But once you allocate, you save, then you know, I could only live on that which is left. But make sure you save, because saving is a mandatory in these difficult times. For couples, it may be less, but ensure some amount to save. And in these times, people who are married need to love each other more than ever before. You got to love each other more than ever before, because too many couples live separate financial lives. And because of that, you got to pool your resources. So whatever is the reason why you're living separate financial lives, as much as it's practical, you need to come together, because in these times, you need to have a strict budget, and you need to have one person who is better at money spending, control the budget in the two of you. Because this is a time for very strict financial management. And then, as we will see later on, the things that I recommend, well, you know, there's some concern about the unit trust and what could happen to your funds and so on. That's not a debate we'll get into now. But unit trust is still a good place to put your money, but the return is very low, 1 point something percent. But there are insurance products where you could get savings as well as life insurance. And those are things that you could explore. But I have found that credit unions are giving better rates of return than most institutions right now. So if you're in a credit union, it will be good for you to investigate what sort of rate of returns that you could get, right? So if your expenses exceeds your income, the upkeep is your downfall. So if you have more expenses than income, as so many people know, you could talk to me offline, but you've got to find a way to either generate more income and or reduce expenses. Sometimes that is easier said than done, because some people are in a situation where they really practically can't reduce expenses. And by the way here, let me say something. In this climate, one of the first things I tell people right now is access whatever grants that the government is giving if you will qualify. Now, I am not getting involved how long it takes and so on, but if you could get grants or support from your government, from your church. Pride, the time for pride, if your situation has changed and you need that help, pride has to take a back seat until you reestablish yourself in such a way that you could have the luxury of pride. But right now, I'm telling people, pride gone through. You got to focus on where you could get support if it is needed, if you lose your job, or if your situation has changed and you need that help. Pride must go through the door. And then we always talk about this hire purchase. There's not a time for you to be taking things from courts for 2 years and 3 years. Them days are past, and paying double the amount of the value of the item and running up credit card debt, and you can't repay it, and you're juggling more than one card. These are not time for those kinds of things. So if you're in that, you have to find ways, talk to someone, talk to your banker, talk to a financial advisor, somebody like me, talk to someone to find a way to reduce your indebtedness and to be able to minimize your debt stock. Because high debt in this kind of environment is burdensome. Many times you can't just come out of it in quick succession according to your situation, but you could find strategies to start the process of reducing your debt. And then it has the old, I must have a brand new car, no down payment, but I'm looking good, but I'm paying back $2,000, $3,000 a month in car loan. Sorry, goodbye. I am suggesting to you strongly, especially young people who are getting married, it's better you have a second-hand car, small amount, working well. We know it's important that it's working well. And you put that the difference, instead of having this high loan, to getting a down payment for a home or paying a mortgage. But it's very difficult to have brand new cars and a mortgage loan. But young people now who are professionals are getting married, and both of them have large income, but you never know if one could lose his or her job, so you got to be cautious. All right, and property should be one of our main financial goals. Land does not rot. If you can't buy a home, you could buy land. And by the way, there's no law that says you must build a house within a month of buying land. You could build your home little by cash. There's a group of people in this country who build their homes little by little over years. And one day you wake up and you see one massive house they have, upstairs and downstairs. I hope you're reading me. Downstairs is business, upstairs they live in. So they're generating income from the business downstairs. Or you could build up upstairs and downstairs, no matter how long it takes. I mean, it's easier said than done. And your downstairs could be rented out if you're so inclined to give you income to help you repay your debt if you have a mortgage loan. All right. This here personal net worth sheet. Wealth is really measured by net worth, assets minus liabilities. So I always encourage people from year to year, examine and see if your net worth is growing. You can do that on the 1st of January every year. If your assets minus your liabilities from January 2020, God spare your life, to January 2021, if your net worth has improved. That's how you measure what you're doing is making sense. Net worth. That's how wealth is measured. And net worth starts with how you spend your money every time you generate income. So net worth is critical. So I always tell people, when we rent, we make someone else rich. When we own property, we make ourselves rich. Financial independence comes with discipline. We cannot always get what we want when we want. Live below your means. We have to start living. We can't always get what we want when we want. We can't always get the most expensive. In other words, in these times, looking good may be a downfall. You have the most expensive phone, most expensive car, dressing the best, and you have no savings. Makes no sense. It's better you have a little chup phone. People laugh at you. Boy, that's the phone you have, boy. A man like you. People always tell you that. A man like you, that is the phone you have. They had the expensive phone. You had the savings, and them had nothing. So you have to decide if you want to look good and scrunt or look reasonably well and have money set aside. Because society sometimes puts pressure on people to buy a certain car, to live in a certain house. Those times are gone. We're looking forward to the second coming of God. Material things mustn't be so important again. The days for importance of material things have to be reduced. So the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Inclusive of mortgage, our debt servicing ratio should be not more than 35 to 40%. In other words, whatever is your income, if you're married, whatever is your joint income, whatever is the amount of your debt repayment each month, including mortgage, it should not be more than 40% of your income, your gross income. If it's 50, 60%, you have a problem. 70%, you have a real problem. You have to work to reduce that. Analysts, financial analysts say it should be 35 to 40% alone, maximum. In fact, if you go in for a loan at a bank or anywhere, and your debt servicing ratio is 50% and so on, they normally wouldn't give you the loan. Because they figure you won't be able to repay the loan. Many of us are young, Gus, so we may not feel retirement is coming. Many of us feel crisis coming soon. And the signs of the times reflect that. So we may not be putting a lot of emphasis on financial things like retirement. But it is still good to put monies aside just in case for retirement. Many companies have built-in retirement plans, contributory or none. Then you have your NIS where you will be putting monies aside. But you should always be focusing on retirement income. We should be looking for a health plan, because health expenses, although we have free, quote unquote, health facilities in Trinidad, if you have to have options, you have to have a proper health plan or a hell of a lot of savings. And whatever your savings level, you could go in a hospital, a private institution with plenty of money and leave poor, because health over extended time, ill health in a hospital with surgery, etc., could wipe out even the most wealthy individual, one of the most wealthy individuals. So right now, as I said, treasury bills, 2% over a year, that's the rate of return. Unit trust and other investments. Well, the banks, you're getting little or nothing, but the banks, all the banks have unit trust type instruments, mutual funds, but the rates of return generally are very low. You do best over treasury bills. Credit unions are giving some of their savings plans give much higher rates of returns. If you're in a credit union, you could check that out. And as I said, land or rot, real estate is really the place to go. But for married couples, getting average income, even both of them together, it's very difficult to get a home. It's very expensive to get a home and to repay for it. So, the other option is to buy land, which is easier to acquire and over time build, right? But real estate is something everybody should strive for. Even if your land is bought in a rural area, land or rot, and it's important that we could acquire real estate. And real estate investment normally is a hedge against inflation. Right now, as Dr. Buckmeyer said, the real estate market is not very buoyant. So now it's a buyer. By the way, now it's a buyer's market. If you can afford a second property now is a buyer's market, because prices are not as high as before. They have come down a bit, and there is a set of excess stock of homes on the market, land on the market. You could just be watching at different opportunities from time to time. There are various sites that will tell you what is there and what you could buy. Just like cars, there's a lot of excess stock of cars. Things are down. This is a buyer's market in general. So you should take more time to examine, to look for, and to negotiate for your best deals, because there's not much economic activity. So this is a time for people to buy stuff if they can afford. investment related stuff. And this is a time you could also use small businesses to supplement your income. Some people are able to run a small business as well as work full time in order to generate income. But we know that the market is tough. That small business has to be practical, and it has to be something that you're doing well at, and you're reasonable in your pricing and your service is good, right? So I recommend these material of things we could read, especially the one below, The Millionaire Next Door, by Professor Stanley and Danko. Gives you a synopsis of to what are some of the attributes of millionaires. And I'm looking at the time, so I want to wrap up in about 2 minutes. One of the attributes of millionaires is that they live way below the means. Many millionaires, now they have more affluent millionaires who are more flamboyant, and you know that they have wealth. But many people who are rich, you can't know they have wealth. And that's why the book is called The Millionaire Next Door, because you could be living next door to a millionaire. Now remember, a millionaire could be assets minus liability give you $1 million. So that many people, according to the house alone they have, they are millionaires because they have a small mortgage balance and the house is worth over $2 million. So they are millionaires just by having a home. And most people only acquire a home and cars. But millionaires are ones. And by the way, most people who are rich, financially rich, don't work for anybody. We have been stereotyped that you get a degree and you go and work for somebody. If you really want to make something of yourself, now you have to be cautious, obviously. But developing a business and setting up your own business and determining your own destiny, that's how you really generate wealth, by having your own rather than working for someone else. Working for someone else is like renting. When you rent, you're making somebody rich. When you're working from someone else, you're making someone else rich. So it is ideal. Not everybody will be able to do it, but it's ideal for us to be able to, if possible, those of us who are so inclined to develop your own business. And I am suggesting this evening that the future, yes, is shaky, but God is consistent and all-powerful and in charge. If our lives are in His hands, despite the uncertainty, we'll be fine, but things will get worse, and we can't depend on change of government or a new government or old government to be the source of our comfort. It has to be God, and I am encouraging people to network their skills among their immediate crowd, and I'm encouraging people to get involved in self-sufficient ideas like helping fix your own stuff and getting as far as is practical into agriculture. And you could do agriculture in groups, but we know that is not normally our desire, the land, but it's becoming more and more necessary for us to do that. And that's basically it. Live below your means, live below your means, live below your means. Save, 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 save. Watch your borrowing. Be very cautious in borrowing, because even though you're a couple and both of you all are making $100,000 a month each, you don't know if your job will remain that consistent or that secure. And that's my story this evening. Are there any questions?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elder Jones, because you raised some important issues. I'll start with this one, that we really have to love each other more than ever before. So for those who are married, let's get with the program. We can no longer live financially separate lives. So that is a very strong take-home point. But very early in the presentation, you started by recommending that persons cook more at home,
Yep.
start developing their kitchen garden. Um, but one of the younger persons who are on the session now, they have asked, but if people don't go out and eat, she will not get paid. So how do we now balance the need for spending for persons to get a salary? I mean, they're working hard. It is secure work in that sense. They're doing their best within the skill set that they have. But appreciating too that the hospitality industry is under crisis as well.
Yeah.
But you're advising that we watch our dollars closely. So perhaps we could start there.
Well, it's a juggle. If the person is in the in the food industry,
Yes.
yes, it's ideal that people go out and eat. But even because of the scare COVID, more and more people are pulling back right now. With this spike, this drastic spike, they recorded 50 cases yesterday over a period of time, but that was announced. So people are scared. So you'll find that the food industry is the one where it'll take a hit. It has taken a hit all over the world. So it's a juggle between balancing your expenditure. You must do some sort of leisure. We can't just stay in our homes like prisoners. And if we are in the industry, well, we'll want people to spend. So it's a kind of balance that's difficult to say exactly what, but if you're doing a budget and you're allocating some money to eating out or spending money out, it has to be something that you could afford so that you could do it, but could afford it. I know of a couple where the husband insists that the children, that this person has 3 adult sons, we're not calling any name, but twice a month, like on a Sunday, one Sunday, they must buy food so that the mother has nothing to do, right? There's somebody in Australia, and they have a son who doesn't live at home. He must invite them home at least once a month so the mother has nothing to do on the Sabbath. There are things that you could do, but it must be part of our financial plan, which is called a budget. If you're not budgeting, the time for starting back budgeting is now, and the time for couples to get together to budget. But we know that story is not as easy as it says, because some people live separate financial lives forever. But ideally, if you could, get back together and budget as a couple together.
Okay, and while we are assuming, and I'm our guests, as I am asking questions, please share your questions in the chat. Let us utilize the skill set that is present with us in the person of Mr. Brian Jones. Now, we are assuming that we are of one mind in terms of what a budget should look like. What are the key components that we should always have or always cater for in our budget, our monthly budget, weekly budget, and so on?
Right. Well, the main things that are normally in a budget will be food. Well, you'll be paying, most people either paying rent or mortgage. If you're paying neither, that is financial heaven. No rent, no mortgage, that's perfect. You more find people who are older, reach a stage where they have paid off their mortgage, and so their disposable income may have dropped, but their expenditure may have dropped drastically as well. Other than that, you'll find food, transportation, what do you call it? Things like cable, phone, internet. Those are sort of staple expenses that are now around. Utilities, TNTech, WASA, if it's your own home, those sort of things are the things that will form your budget. So it will basically be food, mortgage or rent, transportation, whether you have a car or you're traveling, utilities, TNTech, WASA if you have your own home, internet, telephone bill, whether it's a cell phone or a landline. And by the way, there are ways to reduce your tea and tech bill. But most people I know don't have very much trouble with the tea and tech bill, but they have, because you have bulbs now, energy saving bulbs that last very long, they're more expensive. And there are things you could do to cut down on your tea and tech bill. You could really control certain expenses. And with the competition in many sectors like the internet, keep looking all the time for a better and better package, internet, cable, and so on, to keep your costs coming down. So those are the main components of your budget. And then you'll also, if you have children, well, if you have children, people, just pray, you go to sleep, and when you wake up, they're big men or big women. Because children will eat you out in food. They always want something. It's clothes, shoes. They're always in something. And they always have to get, it's tough when you have kids. Most people become wealthy after their children are grown and leave the house.
What a truism. What a truism. So as we continue, and it's either that Brian spoke very clearly, and so we have no more questions and we know what is in our action plan, or some things aren't as clear, but we don't want to ask. Please ask the questions as quickly as possible, given that time is running out. But Elder Jones, you mentioned that now is the time to network. Right. Now is the time to create that small business, that micro enterprise that you always wanted to do. And so my question is, what are some of those small business ideas that you think would be very relevant for such a time as this?
Well, it's according to your skill level. You know, some people they're working, but they have skills in other areas, you know, whether it is, if you're a professional, let's say you have a degree in counseling and you're working for organization, you have the opportunity, as an example, to counsel privately if you have the time and you could develop it. And you want to start with your immediate family, friends, and association of groups that you're associated with. If you're a tradesman, but say you're a plumber and you're working for a company, you have the opportunity to generate income on the side. You know, it's according to your circumstance, or you could just develop a skill by training or learning and put that skill outside there if necessary, you know, because sometimes people's income is inadequate because they can't really reduce expenses. So the income is inadequate. They can't reduce expenses, so they have to generate more income. All right? But networking is going to be critical. And let me just say two things quickly. Love Until is looking to repaint its building, and we're looking for painters, and that has turned out to be a nightmare. When if we had a listing, proven, tested, and tried of painters in the area or within the church, we will be able to quickly access those people, you know? So we may have people right under our nose who could do it, but we're not aware, you know? So networking is critical. Some people even getting together and buying in bulk, buying groceries, buying supplies in bulk, you know? So in difficult times, people have to become more creative, and you have to, all traditional forms of doing things have to go out the window, and you have to look for new and innovative ideas. Somebody has asked, there's a so-called investment that is taking over Trinidad and Tobago like wildfire. It is called Susu Flower Pyramid. What is your take on this? Today, a very good friend of mine has been begging me to join. Another professional asked me about it. You see these kind of things? I always say no, 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 because many times they come, as fast as they come, they go. And even though the person was telling me, relook at it today, and it's doing so much marvelous things for him, and he's now able to buy the whole world. One of its components is that I bring in two people, and then each of those people bring in people. And so it is based on, you just have to keep going, bringing in people. And if it breaks down, the whole system will break down. So I always stay away from these things because I feel invariably they break down. But some people like they do well in it. I never advise it. The short answer is I don't advise it because I feel money is only come from hard work. Maybe I dumb, stupid, and foolish, but money really is through hard work. Even if you're doing illicit things, it's hard work. Somebody else is asking how effective it is getting a couple of persons to pull together and buy. That'll make a big difference because you save by buying wholesale. Your cost comes down by buying wholesale. So if you a group, family members could come together, buy wholesale like Price Mart and others, or even wholesale places, your prices will come down and you'll be better off. And then somebody is asking, I may have missed as I tuned in late, what percentage of your salary do you suggest we save? Well, we save minimum 10% as an average, but you could save much more than that according to your expenses and your circumstances. But it should not be, as far as it's practical, less than 10%. And as I said, save first.
Right.
So,
And
yeah, go ahead.
a comment was made, once it's a pyramid, run far from it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Okay. So the questions have been coming in fast and furious. We spoke about creating that rainy day fund.
Right.
And also establishing, and I like the way you put it, we need to emulate the good things, right? Land does not spoil.
Right.
Land does not spoil. We have to build our homes, if necessary, bit by bit. And in the meantime, you could plant on the land. Yes?
Right. Very true. Very true.
So in terms of creating this rainy day fund, and I'm thinking particularly about those who currently are they sell, let's say, clothing as a small business. We recognize that people are not buying as much because they're not going out as much.
Yes.
Can you perhaps just embellish a little more on very practical steps that you can take to become a little more liquid? And in addition to that, do you have any advice on paying mortgages, with respect to both the interest and principal? So perhaps if you can do any additional payment.
Right. Well, it's according to what your mortgage deed says. Some people are able to pay off their mortgage earlier by paying additional months each year, right? But you have to know what your deed says, because with mortgages, you have a penalty for finishing too early, right? Because they budget for this big set of interest over time. So ideally, with mortgages, the shorter the period, the better for you. But we know the implication, which means the repayment is higher. But if you are already in an existing mortgage, you need to be very aware with your mortgage deed, and you could accelerate payments, and they normally will give you a corridor by which maybe you could pay 2-3 months extra and not incur penalties, because what you don't want to do is be repaying it and incurring penalties, but you want to accelerate the repayment. So you have to examine that, right? And the other thing is that if you enter closed business, and like now closed business is not doing well because people saying that they going on closed don't know what they look like again, as a joke. Then you may have to say, if that is not doing well, what else could I switch to that is more relevant? Because remember, with all disadvantages, there come advantages. People who selling masks and things now making a killing. There's an industry for people to get into, making masks and so on. There seems to be no limit to the number of masks that are needed. People selling gloves, and they're different things. The groceries doing better than ever before in this time. Drugstores doing better than ever in this time. So there are industries who are better off for the pandemic than others. Few, but there are. So you got to be aware of your market to know how to adjust to be doing that which is relevant and practical.
Mm-hmm. You spoke to, and perhaps this may be the last question. That is, if someone else doesn't have a pressing question. You spoke to this time being a buyer's market.
Right.
And is therefore critical to, if it is you have the funds available to get in, to purchase your own property, whether it is in your own home or even if it is to buy land. What are some of the questions that you think the potential buyer should ask to really ramp up their negotiating skills, if you will, their negotiating potential? What are just, whether it's 2 or 3 questions that
first of all, you need to
put in there too?
Sorry. But first of all, you need to know what is the price, that the going rate for whatever you're looking to purchase. Because you do not want to be purchasing anything right now that is, the price is higher than the valuation you'll get. If you're going to buy a property and the valuation of the property is going to be less than the price of the property, you have made a bad investment, unless you know down the road that this property value will escalate so well that it makes sense. The place that property value will escalate so well that it will make sense, in purchasing property, the normal standard is location, location, location. So the place that has the prime property in Trinidad is Laventille Hill. But we know the practicality. If you take Laventille Hill and you put it in Westmoreland, that property will go by about 10 times the value. So location is important. But because a lot of the good location is already gone, it's important to know what is the going price for the property or properties in similar appearance or so, like this one. So you need to know that. So when you go to negotiate, you want to be able to negotiate knowing what is a practical value you'll get. And you shouldn't be looking to negotiate with people, because there are some people who will not move their price. Well, then you need to look for something else, because the worst thing can happen. You're going to buy a property, you're going to take a loan, and the value comes in less than the cost price of the property. So you have to know the value so you can know what questions to ask. You need to know if it's not a new home, how long that house has been in existence. You must ensure that the house is free of all encumbrances, or you're aware of what the encumbrances are. So you'll have to do a search. No mortgage company will lend you money on a property that they haven't done a search on to know what's the existence, right? Those are the kinds of questions that you need to ask. And you need to be able to have some professional who can look at the property to see if it really worth its salt.
Thank you so much. The comment is made, even though you stated that the best financial place to save may be a credit union due to the fact that the interest may be more than in other banking systems. Is it always wise in these times, knowing that when monies are needed, it is very hard to get your own monies out of a credit union?
Yes, that is very relevant. So I always advise people, credit union normally have shares. The problem is with the shares, number one is which credit union is critical. And secondly, where you have your money. You have a breakdown between shares and savings. It's more difficult to get your money out of shares because normally there's a lead time for you to wait to get your money. So it's more to put your money into savings where you can get your money out more rapidly. But if you're looking, some people go into a credit union to get 2 or 3 times the amount in loans, then you have to take the risk and go into shares where you could get that done, right? So it's a little juggle. But the savings, according to your goals, will determine where you put your money, shares or savings. Because the person, Beverly Solomon, made a very good point.
Yes, yes. Well said. And so, going once, going twice.
Frank Sinatra, now the end is near.
the end is near.
You might even know who Frank Sinatra is.
Do we have any additional questions that may be burning that we would want to ask this financial guru at this time? There are several takeaways from today's session. We recognize and we appreciate, first of all, that we are living within a very precarious financial season.
Right.
But we don't know when it will end. But we know someone who knows when it will end.
Come on now.
And so it is our privilege, it is our honor to put ourselves into the hands of the creator of our souls.
Yes, that's right.
And so once we trust God to lead us through this process, we can come out of it successfully. You know, as we're talking about that, Brother Jones, when we think about trusting God, sometimes there seems to be dissonance between saying, well, we trust God, but we have to live and face the mortgage every month.
Right.
We have to often face an empty fridge by the end of 2 weeks, even after you got the food parcel. How can we really strengthen our faith knowing that God is still God when the bills are looming?
Well, faith without works is dead. So some people feel trusting God is just sitting down waiting for God to work miracles. We have to do our part. And I'm telling people that some people who come to the foundation for, as an example, you just use for food supply, Lawrence is not the only place to get food from. So they have a food chain. So that after the 2 weeks, Lawrence food runs out, they have a second organization or government that they would get food from. But in these times, it's so difficult because some people are looking for work a long time. I am saying you may need to generate your own income by doing things for yourself or businesses for yourself, being creative and do stuff. But in the meantime, also try to access grants that are available through private institutions or government. We know government really sometimes, that's a whole debate in itself, and I shouldn't be debating that the day before. But put in your request to the government if you qualify. However long it takes, just keep falling up, praying and falling up. But try to access help if needed and try to get stuff going for yourself. In other words, don't just sit down and wait to be able to get a job. But there are things we could do, opportunities that are available for you to get going in order to generate income. Because I think we're in the last days and things will certainly never ever get better.
Got you. So we're putting ourselves into the hands of our Lord who loves us with an everlasting love. Mr. Solomon is saying, would I be able to get a loan from their deposit, or rather from my deposit in a credit union as on shares?
I am not sure. I think it's normally shares only. But I'm not sure. It's according to the credit union. And that's why now it's very important for you to be in a reputable credit. Well, I have to be very careful what I say in light of the audience. But you have to be very careful the credit union you're in because, yeah, you just have to be careful. Because some of them are very punitive, as Mr. Solomon is saying, when it comes to taking your money out.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to wait too long, and their problem is just their cash flow is poor. Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing you say is that whether it is you're in a credit union or any other type of banking institution, we need to read the fine print.
That's right. I am from insurance industry and people always abuse you, but you didn't tell me that. That's why it's important. Sometimes I tell people, I was advising a member of our church, ask for a sample insurance contract and make sure that in the contract, before you finalize, is what you think it will be. Because when it's time to pay the claim, the insurance company will enforce the letter of the law of the contract. Because if they audit it and they don't do it, they'll be held accountable. So you need to know. Because insurance is another discussion by itself, where it's very important that people create estate through having life insurance, right? And what type you have. There are many advisors who will advise you properly what type you have, how much you need to get, and so on. Because you could create an estate post your life by having insurance, cleaning up your debt, paying off your debt, and leaving your family with something that they could live on or move forward with. Another discussion.
Okay.
It's time to wrap.
So,
That's been good. I enjoyed it. And people know where to find me, or they know where to find you. And once they find you, they can find me. I know you won't tell them that, am I my brother's keeper?
Well, you just said it. You just said it. So thank you so much for your presence.
Yes, it's a pleasure.
This evening, we've touched on a number of points. And so be clear as to the investments that you're making. Ensure that they would refund you well at this time. Ensure that you are living within your budget. Create a rainy day fund. The days aren't going to get sunnier, even though there may or may not be a change of government. You need to live financially more intimate one with another as a couple. Pool your resources. And talking about pooling, we need to network more as a community of believers. We need to network more as a community in terms of your own family units, your relatives. Purchase in bulk so that you can enjoy the savings. Keep in mind what is closest to you, what skills God has placed in your hand, and use these skills to establish innovative, creative, small business ideas. God bless you, and let's pray to close. Certainly, you can find me at Slette Buckmeyer, Slette Buckmeyer, Buckmire @gmail.com, and we can continue the conversation with Mr. Brian Jones at that point. So let's bow our heads for prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening session. Thank you for all the tips and strategies that we have been guided through and to, so that our financial health would be more positive. In a special way, please continue to provide for those whose situation seems very bleak, Lord. There are landlords who haven't received rent for a long time. Lord, there are persons who have experienced a cut in pay, or they may have even lost their jobs. And I thank you, Lord, for being our provider. Indeed, our expectation is from you. So we hold on to you, Lord, and we ask you for your continued wisdom to stay with us, to remain with us, to influence us, so that we can still live lives that will glorify you, physically, tangibly, so that our neighbors or friends or family members can see that we serve a God that cares about every aspect of our lives. Thank you for all that you're doing for us, and for all the guests that are on now, as well as those that will see this program in the future. We praise you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining us today. at the Laventil SDA Skills Camp, and the next session will be a wild card. So you stay tuned and we will see you then. God bless you. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.